My husband's old cigar bark smelled like Spanish cedar and regret, the kind of rich, oily scent that lined his humidor and held decades of quiet obsession. On the last photo tucked inside, a faded Polaroid of him holding a raw 1913 Liberty Head nickel in a 2x2 miler flip, his handwriting in blue fountain pen had etched 7 words that rewired my pulse. Do not trust them. Save yourself. 3 years later, that same photo sits laminated under the glass of my sales counter, and directly above it a tablet plays a silent loop of my stepson's deposition, the one where he swears my signature is authentic, while a forensic analyst's report proves otherwise. Behind me, in a windowless back room, he polishes 10th-ounce silver rounds for minimum wage, 40% of every paycheck siphoned straight into my trust account by court order. The sign on the door reads Proof of Betrayal Numismatics, and the whole arrangement is a lark I never have to pick again. My name is not important. What matters is that before I married Richard, I spent 23 years as a working locksmith, the kind who could feel a pin stack click home under a tension wrench in my sleep. I opened safes, repinned Mordai cylinders, installed commercial access control in downtown office buildings. My hands knew things my mouth did not speak, and I could read a lark's personality from the way the plug gave resistance at 10 degrees. When I met Richard, he was the first person in my life who did not care about coins for their price tags. He cared about precision, the way a coin's edge could tell a story without words. I left the trade behind at 41 to help run his small coin shop, but the muscle memory never disappeared. That turned out to be a hidden inheritance all its own. Richard was a quiet collector, the sort of man who could spend a Saturday afternoon with a loupe and a reference book while the rest of the world screamed past his window. He had a small family inheritance, a patient eye, and one true obsession, early American gold and the key date nickels. His crown jewel was a raw 1913 Liberty Head nickel, Type 1 VG details, holed and plugged at 2 o'clock, but certified genuine by PCGS with a tamper-proof serial number. He bought it with a cashier's check in 1996 from a dusty estate sale in Dayton, Ohio, while I stood beside him and held the trifold auction receipt like a holy relic. I was there. I watched the seller's hands shake as he passed the coin across the table. Richard celebrated by taking me to a diner and ordering 2 slices of pie, 1 apple and 1 cherry, and he handed me the receipt and said, "Hold on to this. Someday someone might ask if it's real, and you'll be the only other person who can swear to it." I tucked it into my wallet and carried it until the leather wore thin. Together, we formed a small coin dealership called Proof Coinage LLC. I held 49%. Richard insisted on a private operating agreement drafted by a boutique asset protection attorney, a document full of tripwires and dead man's switches I never fully appreciated until after he was gone. Buried in Article 14 was a clause that required any transfer of a key asset, defined as a coin with a certificate number from a recognized grading service, to be executed only with both partners' physical, in-person acknowledgement before a specific federal credit union notary. And on top of the notary's green shield seal, the clause demanded a right index fingerprint scan, a biometric verification registered with the Treasury's Financial Crimes Enforcement Network under a suspicious activity red flag protocol for high-value tangible assets. Richard called it his two-key system, and he made me promise to never, under any emotional duress, sign away my stake without that fingerprint. It felt like overkill at the time. It became the only thing between me and a forged signature. Richard died of a sudden coronary at 7:42 a.m. on a Tuesday, slumped in his recliner with a magnifying loupe still looped around his neck. I was the one who found him. The coffee in his mug was still warm, a half-finished inventory sheet for a consignment of 20 St. Gordon's double eagles resting on the side table. The paramedics were kind, the paperwork was brutal, and by 3:30 that afternoon my stepson Derek had already arrived. Derek was Richard's biological son from a marriage that had detonated decades before I entered the picture, and the boy had been spoiled into a glossy, hollow adulthood. He wore a cashmere crewneck that still had the price tag crease across the back. His wife Margaret managed his image with the precision of a congressional handler. She had highlights that cost more than my first lathe and a smile that never made it to her eyes. They did not bring food. They did not bring condolences. They brought a file folder, a notepad, and a notary they had hired off a billboard who waited in the driveway with the engine running. Within 3 hours of my finding Richard's body, they were pulling boxes out of his study, sorting estate items into keep, sell, and toss with a speed that told me they had already rehearsed. Margaret had a clipboard and a labeling gun, and she catalogued Richard's library as if it were a warehouse auction. Derek yanked books off shelves, flipping through them for loose cash and ignoring the family photographs that fell out. They spoke to each other in clipped, transactional phrases that treated my grief like static on a radio. I moved through the house in a daze, watching my life get stripped and categorized, and I noticed Margaret giving Derek a slight nod when she thought I was not looking, as if they were running a play from a script. The cigar box was in the toss pile, balanced on top of a stack of old auction catalogues. It was a modest Spanish cedar humidor, worn at the edges, a brass clasp that never quite lined up. Derek pried it open, saw the stack of Polaroids and yellowed receipts inside, snorted and dropped it into a black trash bag. "Junk," he said. "Dad hoarded paper like a gerbil." Margaret did not even look up from her phone where she was texting someone, and I caught a glimpse of the words, "estate sale inventory list," before she tilted the screen away. I waited until they went to the kitchen to argue with the caterer about the cost of the funeral lunch, their voices rising over the clatter of the coffee maker. Then I fished the box out of the cold plastic bag and slipped it under my cardigan. The weight of it against my ribs felt like the last solid thing in the world. That night, after everyone had left and the house was silent except for the hum of the refrigerator, I sat in Richard's den and lifted the lid. Underneath a folded auction slip for a 1901 quarter and a news clipping about the discovery of the 1913 nickel hoax, I saw a Polaroid I had forgotten existed. Richard, much younger, grinning under his reading glasses, holding the Liberty Head nickel in its Mylar flip. That distinctive olive green label of the old heritage auction house was visible beneath his thumb, showing the lot number and a faint notary seal from the original transaction. I had taken that photograph on our second anniversary, using an old instant camera with a flash that always overexposed his forehead. On the reverse, in fountain pen, in a hand I knew as well as my own, he had written, "Derek will try to take everything. Do not trust them. Save yourself." I pressed the photo flat on my thigh and felt something switch inside my chest. Grief collapsed into a cold, hard vigilance. There was no cry, no shaking, just a quiet recalibration of every priority I had ever had. I looked at the photo again and noticed in the bottom corner of the frame a partial image of the receipt itself, with the PCGS certification number clearly legible, a number that matched the slab's registry. That detail would later become the anchor of an entire legal case. Before I continue this story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you believe that greed can poison even the closest family bonds. Derek and Margaret's manipulation started so smoothly, I almost admired the engineering. The morning after the funeral, they sat me at the kitchen table with a carafe of coffee, a notepad, and a glossy pamphlet for Golden Acres Assisted Living, the Sunrise logo beaming like a threat. Derek's voice was soft, practiced, the voice you would use on a frightened animal. "You've been through so much and we just want to take care of you. Signing a durable power of attorney and a release on Dad's estate makes everything simple. We'll handle the house, the coins, the stress." Margaret leaned in, her hand on my wrist, her rings cold. "You'll stay with us, of course. You shouldn't be alone at a time like this. We've already prepared the guest suite." The document they slid across the table was a boilerplate template Derek had downloaded and butchered. It would have transferred full administrative control of Richard's entire probate estate, including the rare coin collection and the LLC's inventory, to Derek as successor trustee, with a clause that waived my right to an inventory and accounting or any court oversight. They had typed fiduciary twice, misspelling it both times as fiduciary, and the notary line was pre-filled with the name Veronica Alstead, who I later learned was Margaret's cousin from Bacchusfield. I noted all of this with the same eye that once spotted a single miscut pin in a commercial Mordy's lock. I did not argue, I did not ask questions. I let my eyes go foggy, my hands tremble, my voice thin. "I'm just not ready to make decisions," I whispered, letting the words dissolve into a fragile exhale. "Everything hurts. Maybe next week." Derek's jaw tightened, a tiny spasm of impatience, but he nodded with the same syrupy sympathy. "Of course, take your time." Margaret squeezed my hand and said, "We're here for you, Mom," even though I had never been her mother and she had only called me by my first name, once at the wedding. The lie was so smooth it almost passed for sincerity. The next week they packed up the house I had shared with Richard and moved me into their spare bedroom, a minimalist glass-walled suite with bamboo flooring and a mattress that felt like a yoga block. I packed one small roller bag with clothes, toiletries, and Richard's cigar box wrapped inside a winter coat. I became a compliant ghost in their home, a shadow that nodded and ate soup and never made a sound after 8 p.m. But at night I listened. From that first night I started cataloguing sounds. The glass wall that separated my room from the hallway was a design feature Margaret bragged about, floor-to-ceiling panes that let the northern light flow. But glass carries sound like a stethoscope if you press your ear to the right spot. Derek took his private calls in the hallway, thinking the visual transparency meant acoustic isolation. It did not. I would lie in the dark, perfectly still, my ear against the cool glass, and the voices would trickle through with startling clarity. I heard fragments at first. Balloon payment, 30 days, if the nickel clears, 14% VIG. I did not need a dictionary. I had spent enough years around men with bad credit to recognize the stench of predatory lending. Later, I heard him shout at Margaret about a bridge loan and a private investor who was losing patience. Once at 2 a.m., I heard him say, "If the old lady doesn't sign, we'll just have to forge it, the bank won't check." Margaret, in turn, left inventory of their spending like breadcrumbs, invoices from a private jet charter company in the recycling bin, credit card statements with cash advances totaling $42,000 in a single month, a past due notice from a luxury auto leasing firm. I found a torn deposit slip from a cryptocurrency exchange, the remaining balance handwritten as zero. They were hemorrhaging money they did not have, and the lifeboat was the 1913 Liberty Head nickel. That nickel, I pieced together on the 11th night, was already gone. Derek must have accessed Richard's safe deposit box the day after the funeral, before I had even registered the death certificate at the bank. He had removed the coin and bypassed me entirely, listing himself as the sole owner on new provenance paperwork. The sale, I later learned, had been brokered through a boutique New York auction house to a private collector in Dubai for $700,000, wired into an escrow account controlled by Derek. But the money was not free yet, because the bank's compliance department had flagged the transfer, and Derek was scrambling. I needed evidence, not just fragments. I needed a key that turned inside their private space, so I gave myself a reason to be useful. One afternoon, the pocket door lock on the master suite jammed with Margaret's entire wardrobe trapped inside. She was on the verge of tears, her phone already open to a 24-hour locksmith service that charged $300 just to roll a van. I heard the panic from my room and shuffled out, all fake frailty, one hand braced on the wall for effect. "May I look?" I asked, voice barely above a whisper. I pulled a hairpin from my bun, straightened it, then borrowed a small flathead screwdriver from Derek's emergency tool drawer, which still had the original plastic wrap on the handle. The lock was a cheap tubular interior model, the kind with a 5-pin core and 0 security pins. I inserted the hairpin as a tension tool at the 7 o'clock position, using the flathead's tip to rake the pins in a rocking motion. The first pass lifted pins 1 and 3, the second pass caught 4, and on the third pass I felt pin 2 click home against the shear line. The plug turned a 1/4 inch with a soft thump and the door slid open. Margaret stared at me. Derek's eyes narrowed like a hawk that had just spotted something furry and unexpected. "Where'd you learn that?" he asked, the softness gone. "Old hobby," I said, straightening my cardigan. "Richard taught me." A lie, of course, but a necessary one. I saw the worry flicker behind his pupils. They did not know I had been a locksmith for 2 decades before I met Richard, that I had drilled safes in bank vaults and repinned high-security Medico cylinders. That gap in their intelligence was the only advantage I had, and I had just flashed it. But the momentary usefulness bought me a little more trust, or at least the illusion of it. That night I heard Derek whisper to Margaret, "She's more capable than she looks. We need to speed things up." 3 nights later, while Derek and Margaret attended a charity auction they could not afford, I decided to breach the inner vault. Derek's home office had a proper Schlage deadbolt with 6 spool pins, a step up from the bathroom hardware. I had assembled a set of tools from inside my luggage, a paper clip, a barbie pin, and an old wiper blade insert I had found in the garage, its stainless steel just the right gauge for a tension wrench. I bent the wiper insert into a double-ended wrench, curved one end for top of keyway tension, and used the paper clip as a city rake. The barbie pin became a hook pick for single pin picking if the rake failed. I practiced on the bathroom lock twice, just to get the feel of the Schlage keyway. I knelt outside the office door at 11:17 p.m., the house silent. I inserted the tension wrench and felt the plug give a faint, spring-loaded resistance. I raked twice fast and light and felt 2 pins set, but the lock went into a false set immediately, that mushy half-turn that tells you spool pins are waiting. I switched to the hook. Pin 3 was binding, and when I applied careful upward pressure, I felt the counter-rotation on the tension wrench, the telltale sign of a spool's narrow waist catching at the shear line. I backed off my tension slightly, let the pin slide past the false set, and heard the click as it landed in the Bible. Pin 5 did the same, fighting me for a moment before surrendering. Pin 6, the last spool, resisted for 7 seconds as I delicately nudged it upward while balancing the wrench's pressure. Then, with a deep, satisfying thunk, the bolt retracted. Total time, 51 seconds. 20 years of muscle memory had not abandoned me. Inside the office, a metal filing cabinet sat against the wall, its top drawer locked with a simple wafer lock. I used a jiggler I had fashioned from the paperclip, sliding it in and out with a vibrating motion until the wafers aligned and the lock cylinder turned. The bottom drawer was labeled Estates/Trusts in Derek's scribbled Sharpie. Inside, in a manila folder clipped with a butterfly clip, lay the scaffolding of the entire fraud. The first document was a forged release of partnership interest, dated 3 days after Richard's death, purporting to carry my notarized signature. It stated that I, as a 49% partner in Proof Coinage LLC, was voluntarily relinquishing all claims, ownership and profit rights in exchange for $1 and other good and valuable consideration. My signature was a sloppy tracing, the letter loops heavy at the start and end, a classic sign of a paused pen. The notary stamp belonged to Veronica Alstead, Margaret's cousin, and the seal's impression was slightly smeared, as if applied with too much haste, and the date was manually altered with a ballpoint pen from a Tuesday to a Wednesday. That would later be a felony in itself. Behind the release was the sale contract. A private collector in Dubai had purchased the 1913 Liberty Head nickel for $700,000, brokered by the New York auction house. The wire transfer had been sent to an escrow account at a regional bank, with Derek listed as the sole beneficiary. The provenance documents attached to the sale falsely named Derek as the original and sole owner, backdated a gift letter from Richard that I knew Richard never signed, and attached a photocopy of a driver's license that was clearly a Photoshop composite, with mismatched shadows around the ID photo. And behind that, the real gut punch, a promissory note from a hard money lender called Cascade Bridge Capital, secured by the entire inventory of Proof Coinage LLC, with my typed name as co-borrower. The balance was $180,000 at an interest rate of 22%, compounded monthly, due in 45 days. The loan had been taken out 3 weeks before Richard's death, which meant Derek had been planning this before his father's heart ever stopped. He had already spent part of the loan on a leveraged cryptocurrency position that had failed, and now the only way out was to sell the nickel, forge me out of the picture, and hope the escrow cleared before the loan sharks came calling. I found a separate note from the lender, handwritten in red ink, that said, "Final demand, no more extensions." They had not just stolen the coin, they had levered the business I had built with Richard, forged my name onto a predatory debt, and set me up as the scapegoat for their collapse. If the scheme defaulted, I would be the one the creditors pursued, while Derek walked away with the $700,000 already spent on jet charters and luxury leases. I photographed every page with my phone, careful to capture the notary stamp, the signature, the loan terms, and the red ink demand. I restored the filing cabinet to its exact arrangement, relocked the wafer lock, exited the office, and relocked the deadbolt with the same tension wrench and a quick turn of the plug. Back in my spare room, I sat on the edge of that terrible mattress and let the rage settle into a very quiet, very precise blueprint. The next morning, I called Angela Ruiz, a forensic accountant whose firm I had once helped when they moved into a historic building with antique locks. Angela listened without interrupting, then gave me the name of a federal contact. The counterfeit signature on the release, combined with the interstate wire transfer and the esoteric value of the coin, triggered the interest of the United States Secret Service, which has jurisdiction over financial crimes involving high-value tangible assets. Within 72 hours, I was sitting across from Special Agent Marcus Chen in a plain conference room downtown, the cigar box photo in a plastic sleeve between us on the table. Agent Chen was calm, sharp, and spoke in paragraphs that felt like closing arguments. He explained that Richard, in his quiet brilliance, had already seen this coming. The operating agreement we had signed for Proof Coinage LLC contained that dead man switch clause in Article 14. No transfer of a key asset, defined as any coin with a PCGS or NGC certificate number, could occur without both partners' physical, in-person acknowledgement before the specific Federal Credit Union notary. Accompanied by a right index fingerprint scan, the clause had been registered years earlier with FinCEN's Suspicious Activity Red Flag Protocol, a system typically used to track money laundering. When Derek had attempted to move the nickel into the escrow account, the bank's automated compliance software had cross-checked the transfer against the FinCEN registry and flagged it. The funds were frozen pending a manual review. Derek, who had never read past page 3 of the operating agreement, had no idea he was already caught in a net that Richard had woven years before. The sale, Agent Chen continued, was legally voidable under the Uniform Commercial Code because title had never properly transferred. The escrow funds $700,000 were locked. The loan from Cascade Bridge was secured by assets that were in part mine and not Derek's to pledge. But to make the criminal case airtight, the Secret Service needed one more thing: direct evidence that Derek knew he was forging my signature and intended to defraud me. Chen handed me a small silver pen with a recessed microphone button. It records to internal memory, 10 hours of capacity, one press to start, one to stop. Get him to talk openly about the release, the notary, or the debt, and we can move. I accepted the pen and felt a strange, quiet awe wash over me. Richard had left me a key I did not know I had, a biometric fingerprint I could use to dismantle the entire conspiracy. All I needed was Derek's own voice, captured in his moment of maximum greed. I tucked the pen into the inner seam of my cardigan and went home to stage a dying. I practiced the feint for 2 days in the bathroom mirror, timing my collapse to the second. I needed the collapse to look authentic, the kind of sudden cardiac event that would trigger instinct in a decent person, but only impatience in a monster. I chose a Tuesday morning because Derek was usually home on Tuesdays and Margaret stayed upstairs with her online Pilates instructor until 10. I armed the recording pen at 9:10 a.m., pressing the button and feeling it vibrate once to confirm. Then I made a show of weakness at breakfast, pale skin from staying up all night, shaky hands, slurred words. I dropped a coffee cup on the tile floor and let the shards scatter. At 9:17 I clutched my chest, drew a ragged breath and crumpled onto the cold floor just inside the kitchen threshold. In my left hand I held a folded copy of the forged release, smudged with a real coffee spill for authenticity. I lay motionless, eyes half closed, my breathing shallow and deliberate. I heard Margaret's distant Pilates music from upstairs, a cheery pop song about self-empowerment. Then Derek's footsteps pounding down the hallway. He stopped. I expected his hands on my shoulders, maybe a shout for a phone. Instead, I felt the slip of paper slide out from under my limp fingers. He stepped over my body, his loafer planting inches from my face, and I heard the paper being unfolded. Then his voice, thick with annoyance, nor a trace of fear. Finally, this exact one. If she dies now, we can file it with the county before the estate audit. Margaret, get the notary on the phone. Don't call an ambulance yet. He stepped back over me. I counted 43 seconds before Margaret came down the stairs, her tone not panicked but irritated. Is she breathing? Derek answered barely. Let's wait 5 minutes. The loan sharks are not waiting. I lay there, every nerve in my body screaming, and I let the count reach 7 minutes precisely, measuring the time by the slow beat of my heart against the floor. At 9:24 I coughed weakly, stirred and whimpered about low blood sugar. They helped me into a chair, Margaret's hands cold and efficient, Derek's face arranged into false concern. I saw the hastily folded release shoved into Margaret's back pocket. I was done. The pen had captured every word, including the background noise of Margaret's Pilates music. That was the moment any residual family loyalty I had been preserving, even a sliver of it, went silent for good. I would never wonder again. The confrontation happened 9 days later. The Cascade Bridge loan was 3 days from default, and the bank holding the frozen nickel escrow had sent a formal notice of suspicious activity to Derek's registered address. Derek was a wreck, sweating through his designer shirts, snapping at Margaret over dinner. He told me, with the theatrical calm of a man barely holding a lid on a pressure cooker, that we needed to go to the coin shop to sign one small update to the partnership docs, so he could access operating capital to cover an insurance matter. I knew the play: bring me to the store, put a new release and a notary in front of me, and push my finger onto a signature line before I could ask questions. We drove in his leased S-Class, the leather seats cold. I sat in the back, my cardigan pocket holding the cigar box photo and the recording pen, now in rewind mode as a backup. Margaret rode shotgun with a leather portfolio that bulged with papers. The strip mall storefront of proof coinage looked abandoned, the display cases still lined with slabbed Morgan dollars and Franklin halves. Inside, waiting beside the glass counter, stood Veronica Alsted, Margaret's cousin, her notary stamp already in hand. She smiled at me the way you smile at an elderly pet you are about to surrender to a kill shelter. Derek placed a 3-page document on the counter, next to a tray of silver rounds. It was titled General Release and Indemnity Agreement, a retroactive ratification of the earlier forged release, indemnifying Derek against any and all claims. The signature line was flagged with a sticky arrow, and a blue pen sat waiting. "Just right here," Derek said, his voice too high, his knuckles white. "We need to finalize the estate. After this you can rest." I picked up the pen. I looked at Derek's flushed face, at Margaret's tight, expectant smile, at Veronica's bored compliance. Then I set the pen back down with a quiet click. "You forged my signature 3 days after Richard's heart was still warm," I said, each word cold and even. "You sold a coin that never belonged to you. You signed my name onto a loan at 22%, and you stepped over my body to grab a piece of paper while I lay on the floor. You have no idea how many locking mechanisms I have overcome in my life, Derek. Your fraud is the simplest one I have ever picked." His mouth opened like a fish. Margaret's hand flew to her throat. The front door chimed, and Special Agent Marcus Chen walked in with 2 uniformed Secret Service agents and a county prosecutor. Veronica dropped her notary stamp with a clatter that echoed off the display cases. "Derek Holcomb," Agent Chen said, "you are under arrest for wire fraud, bank fraud, identity theft, and forgery. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Margaret started crying in a high, performative pitch. Derek lunged for the documents on the counter, but an agent intercepted his wrist and pulled it behind his back. I stepped forward, pulled the photo from my pocket, and placed it face up next to the forged release. Richard's handwriting caught the fluorescent light, 7 words that were never a warning but a map. I had followed it exactly. The civil lawsuit I filed the following month sought conversion, breach of fiduciary duty, and declaratory judgment that the release was void ab initio. The Secret Service's criminal evidence made conviction nearly certain, and civil liability attached as a matter of law. During discovery, my attorney subpoenaed the escrow records and deposed the auction house representative who confirmed Derek had emailed them a forged provenance. The $700,000 minus what Derek had already siphoned into luxury car payments and a failed cryptocurrency margin call was ordered returned to the frozen escrow. Because the sale was void from the start, title to the nickel had never transferred, and the entire amount was released to Proof Coinage LLC, now fully mine by court order. The court also voided the Cascade Bridge loan as fraudulently obtained, and entered a judgment against Derek personally for $350,000 in compensatory damages, plus interest and punitive sanctions for fraud on the court. Derek took a plea on the criminal side: 18 months in federal prison, 7 years of supervised release, and a restitution order that included every remaining dime of the judgment. Margaret received probation for aiding and abetting, and her cousin Veronica was stripped of her notary commission and hit with a misdemeanor. The coin collection Richard had left, including the 1930 nickel with its clean chain of title now fully documented, came back to me. I sold a few duplicate gold pieces to professional dealers, kept the nickel in a secure vault, and rebranded the shop. I called it Proof of Betrayal Numismatics. The logo is a shattered coin, beautifully designed by a local artist, the cracked lines forming the outline of a key. At the sales counter, I installed a tablet that plays, on a silent loop, the hour-long video of Derek's deposition. Right there in infinite replay is the moment he swears under oath that my signature on the release looked absolutely authentic, while the forensic handwriting analyst's report is projected on a screen next to him, labeling it a poor trace with angle discontinuities and hesitation, marks consistent with slow forgery. The deposition also captures him denying he ever saw the cigar box, then squirming when the prosecution introduces a neighbor's security camera footage of him tossing it into the black bag. And there is the moment he claims, with a straight face, that he was protecting the family legacy. I hired Derek on work release as a coin polisher. He works 40 hours a week in a back room with no windows, using a cotton cloth and a non-abrasive polish on bulk lots of cull silver rounds. It is honest work, and the business pays him minimum wage. By court order, 40% of his gross wages is garnished before the check even cuts, routed directly to a separate restitution trust account I manage. On a 40-hour week at the state minimum, that is exactly $212.80 pulled from his check before he sees a penny. He will be 67 years old before the debt is satisfied, interest included. He does not make eye contact with customers. The deposition video plays all day, and I watch him flinch every time his own voice starts, the same words he spoke over my barely breathing body now echoing in a loop he cannot escape. Some evenings, after I lock the shop and feel the deadbolt's solid thunk under my thumb, I think about Richard. He knew his son better than I ever wanted to believe. That photo, that warning, was a key I did not know I had, cut to a pin configuration that only I could turn. He trusted me with the truth before he ever trusted me with a combination. In a business where authenticity is everything, he gave me a provenance that no forger could duplicate. Not all inheritances arrive as gleaming coins in velvet trays. Sometimes they come as a small, overlooked box that says, in clear handwriting, "You are worth protecting." And when you realize that, you owe it to the person who wrote it to become the safest, smartest lock they ever set. Have you ever discovered a dark secret about someone you trusted completely? How did you handle it? I would like to hear about it in the comments. If this story meant something to you, please like and subscribe to support more true tales of betrayal and justice. Hit the bell so you do not miss the next one. I will see you in the next video.